Well, hey everybody, I'm Nick Pettit at NickRP on Twitter, and I'm a web design teacher here at Treehouse, which of course is the best way to learn about web design, web development, mobile business, and so much more. You can check us out at teamtreehouse.com. Today we have a very special guest here with us in the studio today. This is Sarah Parmenter. Sarah, for people that don't know who you are, how would you describe yourself in your own words?
I'd say I'm a user interface designer, but for people who aren't really in our industry, or if I'm out and about, I sometimes just say I'm a graphic designer for ease of people not understanding what a user interface designer is.
I know what you mean. Sometimes I just say like I'm a web designer.
Yeah,
don't get
sometimes
specific.
I say that, but then people go along the lines of, oh, you must be really geeky, and then I'm like, oh, it's just easier to say graphic designer. But I kind of do lots of things, but predominantly I'm a user interface designer.
Okay, cool. Now, you got your start in design when you were pretty young. And so how did that happen? How did you stumble into design?
In web design, how I started when I was quite small, I guess. I was about 13, 14 when I started in web design, and that was just because GeoCities was quite big. Don't know if you remember it.
Sure. Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah, GeoCities, making your own homepage and stuff like that was quite a thing when I was younger, and the interface for actually uploading your own pictures and changing text, it was kind of clunky, and it used to take an age to load. It was when the internet was like charged per minute to go on. So I started learning HTML just because it was faster to get my stuff up, basically. So I started from there and taught myself HTML, and then when CSS came along and stuff like that, I kind of just kept bolting it on. So I've seen lots of eras of the web come and go. But yeah, I'm self-taught from a young age, and just was lucky that when all these new trends came in, I was at a point where I could keep bolting them on to my existing skill set.
So that's what I was going to ask. It sounds like you're self-taught. Did you attend university at all?
No, I actually was going along different lines when I was younger. I was thinking I wanted to go into acting, and I worked for a casting agent for a while, but made more money out of updating her website than I did out of doing actual casting. So at that point, when I was going to college, I'm not sure what the equivalent is out here, it's between like 16 and 18, I was going along the lines of doing like English literature and acting, and then just keeping the web stuff on the side, because I didn't really understand career-wise what it could do until I kind of stumbled into using it in a professional environment. And I was kind of like, I wonder if this is a thing. Like, if she needs her website updating, then other people must need websites updating, and it kind of went from there, really.
That's interesting. We actually took pretty similar paths. I was acting up until I was about 18 years old, and then I got more interested in like being behind the camera, and that sort of led to web stuff. That's fascinating. I didn't know that. So do you exclusively design stuff for mobile? Because that is kind of what you're known for, or do you design for all sorts of different platforms?
I design for all different platforms. I've gone back to doing print work recently for different things, but mobile design is what I've been doing for some bigger companies for the last 3 years now. I've been designing some apps kind of hush-hush under their kind of umbrella of teams. I've been doing stuff for them. So that's all been mobile design. And I think I was just lucky in that when the iPhone came out in 2006, I was a really early adopter of the iPhone, luckily, and I got really interested in designing for the platform. So I was blogging about a lot of the stuff that other people, when it came to them picking up and saying, oh, actually, I think I want to design for this platform, I'd already documented a lot of stuff. So I became known for that early on, just purely because I was learning and documenting it early on. So,
what attracted you to that platform? I mean, why mobile? Why not?
Honestly, the fixed canvas type stuff. I really like working with a fixed canvas. So the iPhone, it just seemed perfect that you had this perfect kind of rectangle to work within, and I like constraints like that, whereas the web, even when it was kind of 960 pixels and fairly fixed, I still felt like that was kind of a big canvas to work with. I really like the restriction of working, and it was, you know, okay, the operating system's different now, but back then it was really new, and I remember the first time, probably everyone remembers the first time they saw an iPhone and saw the operating system, it was just like magic. And really, like, the colours were really vibrant, and I was just thinking, yeah, I'd love to design for this. This is my sort of thing.
Now, did you start out designing web apps for that, or did you get into it later when the App Store came along? Or
I went straight into designing an app that was going on the App Store. Someone took a chance on me because I designed their Mac app, and they took a chance on me designing their Mac app because I'd done their website, which was like a strange thing that happened. But he sort of said, I've got this app that I want to put on this new thing called the App Store on it for the iPhone, and would you like to have a go at designing it? And I was very honest, and I just said, I've not designed for this before. I want to design for it. If you're happy with me charging for a couple of weeks, but giving me 6 weeks to do it in, therefore you're not paying for my learning curve, but you still get an app out of it.
Sure.
Yeah, I was really lucky that we got an excellent, really, really nice email back from Apple saying it was really well designed, but please don't use this email as any form of endorsement because we can't be seen to endorse any single designer. So I found myself like in the early inception of iPhone design holding this email that said that Apple liked it but couldn't do anything with it.
Right.
But it gave me enough confidence to carry on with it and know that I was doing something right. So yeah, It was good.
Wow, that's amazing. So what's your process like? Do you, obviously you must talk to the client, and then what happens after that? Do you wireframe in pencil or in some sort of app? Do you jump into Illustrator? Do you use Interface Builder at all?
I have used Interface Builder. To be honest, because I've been working with larger teams, the process changes slightly depending on the team around you. So when I've been working for larger teams, I found that it's helpful to do stuff on paper, because you're normally in an environment where you need to express ideas maybe differently to the way that they've set it or thought that the app would go. So normally I get pulled in to kind of rip apps apart and go, is this really the best way that we're doing this as an app? So the process changes depending on who it is. If it's a small team of people, then I tend to just go straight into sort of fairly, I guess, high fidelity wireframes in some form of like Photoshop, Illustrator. I've actually mostly used Fireworks. The only thing I've ever used Fireworks for was that. If it's something for just maybe a smaller type app or something that even maybe a web app, I tend to just go crazy in my sketchbook and scan them and send them to people. You find that people are much happier to comment on sketches than they are when they feel like the level of polish is higher.
It's finished, yeah.
Because they feel, even if it is still in a wireframe stage. So it depends. Sometimes I always start things on paper, even if it's just for my benefit. But these sort of beautiful sketches that you see sometimes people put on Dribble and things like that, mine don't look anything like that. It's more crazy, like rubbed out and then everywhere. But,
I think some people are feeling very encouraged to hear that right now.
Yeah, if people saw my sketchbook, it's like a complete mess. But I think that's what it's there for. A sketchbook isn't meant to be a work of art, it's meant to be a thinking process. And that's why I'm always a bit dubious when people put out these like perfect sketches of things. I'm like, did you just sit and draw that for 20 minutes to then post on Dribble? Because that's not really how I use it, but to each his own.
Okay, so my next question is, what are some of the biggest challenges for designing for smaller screens? Because a lot of people, I find, seem to be more challenged by a smaller screen. You're saying that you think it's actually easier.
Yeah, easier to design for, but not maybe in terms of content is the main problem. I find that the main problem is that people don't necessarily understand the medium as well. So they have a website that has a large volume of content on it, and then you need to have this conversation where it's like, okay, especially if it's mobile, like responsive stuff, you need to have a conversation of what's the most important thing, because otherwise you're going to have reams and reams and a huge amount of swipes to get to the information that you feel is the core. That seems to be the reoccurring theme, is just content transition between screen sizes, which is something that I think we're all going to have to get really, really good at. But that is always the main problem. Or advertising. Companies that I've worked for, they want to insert advertising into stuff and it breaks the flow of what you're doing. I don't think anyone has completely cracked how to get advertising into something that seems seamless and actually nice and part of the experience. It always seems like it kind of breaks and then comes back together for something that you're viewing. So yeah, I think advertising and content transition are the hardest things. I think the graphical thing is less so now, especially since we've gone away from skeuomorphic design. Everything's a lot, can be done in Interface Builder a lot easier. There's less exporting of graphics. So I think it just comes down to advertising, and content becomes the hardest things to port across.
Now, when you design apps in Interface Builder, obviously you're restricted to Apple's human interface guidelines for the most part, unless you're importing your own assets. Do you usually design very customized looking apps, or do you actually prefer to go with Apple's style guidelines?
I prefer a mix of both, if I'm being honest. I'm not completely sold on some of the elements of iOS 7. I'm not convinced that they're right for us right now. I don't like the line icons. I
don't think you're alone.
No. There's some, I mean, it's grown on me. It's definitely grown on me. But there's certain things that I think it's good to question the conventions that Apple put out, because I think everyone's so quick to kind of go, Apple's throwing this new thing at us, which means the web also has to follow this theme, and you suddenly see it pop up everywhere without questioning whether it's actually making good sense. I think some of the things that I personally would change about the new operating system is the buttons. The buttons don't look like buttons anymore.
They look more like links.
They look
without
more like
underlines.
Yeah, they do.
I mean,
they look more like links, and you have to read a lot more or be aware of what the text says rather than knowing that it's a button. I personally would love to see buttons come back, even if they are flat. That's just me. And the line icons that are everywhere, they do take longer to register what it is. If you follow someone's eye pattern, it's like they follow the whole thing and then go, oh, that's what it is, rather than the solid ones. Line icons I really am not loving at the moment, but...
Yeah, I agree, and you see them everywhere too.
Yeah, they suddenly pop up everywhere. But it's not my favourite thing right now, and I think it's good to sometimes question whether those things are done to be different or whether it's actually good user experience. And so sometimes my apps sit in between the two. I follow conventions because we need to get through the app approval process and stuff like that.
Sure.
But then try and bend the rules in that if you've got a good bit of information as to why you shouldn't use stuff because it just doesn't make good UX sense, then I think it's good to bend the rules of the design, even if it comes out of the Apple human interface guidelines.
So you're saying you do that to get it approved initially? Or are you saying
No, I sort of sit between the middle. So you can't go completely crazy on apps sometimes, because they'll come back and say it's so outside of what every other app does or feels like that they don't want it to do that. But I mean, with icons and things like that, that's easy to swap out and easy to have a conversation with a client about. Actually, it's the better user experience. So they won't throw it out for that, but following most conventions helps, except with things like that, I think.
Sure. That's interesting. Okay. So my next question is do you think there's any kind of difference between designing native apps and web apps? Or, because you were saying earlier that, the web shouldn't always follow the conventions of native applications. I mean, what are the differences there for you?
It's a difficult one. I think it depends on whether you're actually trying to mimic the experience of an app using the web, or whether you're actually accessing a website with the intention of it being an informational website. It depends on the two contexts. I've had apps that I've thought or have been told are apps that would be downloaded through the App Store. And when it's actually come to it, it's basically been a wrapped website with tons of JavaScript. So that becomes a problem when people try and scroll and they're expecting it to smooth scroll like it does within an app, and then it freezes and breaks and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, the two I think once upon a time were designed extremely differently, especially in the previous operating system. But now, because everything, again, I hate using the word flat, I hate that whole term, but because it's...
That's what everybody says.
Because we've gone to this flat thing, it actually makes it easier to kind of make this standardized look about everything, even if it is a web app or a website or anything. It sort of all is looking a little similar at the moment.
Right. Okay. Now, do you code at all?
I do. Not for iOS.
Okay.
I tried it and it completely fried my brain, and I wasn't a very nice person for about 3 weeks.
It's a little tough.
Yeah. I find Objective-C and Cocoa very mathematical, and I'm not mathematically brained at all. I'm creative, so like everything is in colours and shapes to me. I do HTML and CSS, some JavaScript, some PHP. I've done Ruby in the past as well. But really, I love being able to make stuff with it. I love that freedom that it gives you, but I'd rather hand something over almost like a really good comp of some sort that a developer can take and actually like plug it in for me. That's what I'd prefer. But I have knowledge of Cocoa and Objective-C and how it works and object-oriented programming and everything like that, but it's one of those things that I just personally don't touch.
I tried it a long time ago, and I agree. It seemed very difficult at the time. I picked it back up just recently, and I'm finding it not as hard.
Okay,
yes, there's hope.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm the same way. You know, I'm very visually oriented. I've done some programming, actually quite a bit of programming, but Objective-C isn't that bad. You can learn it.
Okay, good sign.
So my last question, and then we have some questions from our viewers, is what's kind of the next frontier in design for you? I mean, you're saying that you don't like flat design. I think a lot of people would agree with you, or at least you hate the term.
Yeah.
What do you think is kind of the next, I guess, big challenge for web designers?
I think it comes back to content again. I think we're going to have to be really smart about putting out multiple forms of content, because the devices that are going to access different sorts of content could be anything. I think we truly have to start thinking, although we probably all once laughed at the fact that our refrigerator might have something in it that would be, I think we actually have to start thinking in terms of what screens are going to exist that don't exist now, that are going to need certain forms of content, that aren't going to make us have to go back to the drawing board and rewrite tons of content at a later date. I think it was Karen McGrain, who's like amazing content person, was saying that the best example of that is like TV listings. So when you have a TV listing, some need a long form, others need short form, because they're going, if you think of the way you access it on your television, it's restricted.
Yeah.
If you're accessing it on the web, you might have longer versions available. So I think the key is going to be in content management systems that don't exist right now, that are going to need to have a form of sending different forms of content. And that's not, I don't mean restricted in terms of character, where it will just break.
Right.
Actual different forms of content, where the content reformats with the most important thing at the top, or the most interesting thing at the top, or anything like that, where it actually restructures itself, rather than just being truncated through character size.
Almost like using some sort of artificial intelligence. Is that what you're suggesting?
Some I don't know. I don't have the answer. I think we would all be very, very rich if we did, but I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for us. It won't necessarily come in form of design, because I think we're stripping back on that now, and we're realizing that asset creation maybe isn't the way forward. But
do you think that has anything to do with accessibility?
Yeah, huge part.
Because you know, you're talking about smart appliances, and sometimes it's hard to teach beginners the good reasons behind forming, you know, well-structured HTML. Why would you want to do that? I mean, the browser renders it just fine. If you don't, why do you need to use all these new tags, right? And the example I always use is, these far-flung household appliances that you know, can pull information down from the internet. I've always imagined like this blender that could like talk to you like Siri, you know, and tell you, you know, all the different kinds of smoothies you can make, and it needs to pull down that information in some sort of structured format.
Yeah.
So but that's interesting. I totally agree with you. Okay, so we got a bunch of questions already. This is good. First question says, what do you think about fireworks? Sarah mentioned having used it before. Do you still use it for anything?
No, I've actually just switched to using something called Sketch, which is an app by Bohemian Coding. It's super cheap, really, considering what a great app it is. I think it's about $50. And it does everything that Fireworks and Photoshop and Illustrator would do. So it's kind of a 3-in-1 program. I used to be a Photoshop monkey for years, like 10 years of Photoshop. And I recently switched to Sketch about a month, maybe 6 weeks ago, and I haven't really touched Photoshop since, except for editing photos, which is what it was meant for in the first place.
Well, that's very cool. What's your opinion of skeuomorphism?
I used to love it. I used to really enjoy designing for it, but once you've done one too many leather stitches too far and you start to lose the will to live. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's an interesting thing to look at the concepts of mimicking user interface design that mimics stuff that you would use in real life. I think some apps took it too far. Find Friends was like the most awful.
That's the one I always pick out too, because that doesn't exist in real life.
No.
Like what is that leather stitching and this map even supposed to be?
Yeah,
you know?
That was an interesting one. And I can't remember what app it was that had wooden buttons in it, which I always loved. I kind of loved the idea of wooden buttons. But some things take it too far, but I think it's maybe about scaling back and just looking at what can mimic stuff in real life that people would then find easier from a UX perspective rather than actually physically making it look similar, as similar as having leather-bound stuff in things.
So this is an interesting one. I'm actually personally interested in this as well. Does Sarah have any thoughts, that's you, about designing for television screens?
Oh, yes, I actually pitched for a project for this that they never did. I pitched for a project for this company who take Apple TVs, hack them, sell them back to hotel chains, and then rebrand the kind of when you walk into a hotel and you see the welcome message and stuff like that. It was really interesting what you have to do that, the assets that you need to create, completely alien DPI versions of things that I've never dealt with.
Oh my gosh.
It was, yeah, it's really interesting. I was kind of sad that that never came off because they used a single template and just recolored it for each hotel in the end. But that was a really interesting one because you had static elements and then you had to design things that would change. So weather sections that would change. So it was almost like bringing together all the best parts of designing for iOS, but on one giant screen.
Right.
So it was like having a utility app for weather in one section and then having a rolling news feed on the other and then having other sections. It was really, really interesting, but really steep learning curve.
Well, maybe if those Apple television rumors ever come true, we'll all be designing for TVs again.
Let's hope so.
We'll see. So Edward says, love your glasses, Sarah.
Oh, thanks,
Edward. Other than Treehouse, of course, how can a beginner get more involved in the industry?
Conferences. I know that's probably a really cliche answer, but I would say...
That's what I always say.
Getting involved in the conferences and understanding that our industry is wonderful in the sense of most of our networking, it's not really networking, but it happens in bars after conferences or it happens during coffee breaks at conferences. Even if you're not a particularly confident person, I think learning how to just hold yourself in a conference environment where you feel you can go up and talk to people, maybe people who you see online, see teaching Treehouse stuff, having the confidence in a non-creepy way to walk up and just say, hey, you know, I really love this that you've put out, or I'm really looking to get into something. One thing I have learned is people really love people who are clearly trying their hardest to do something. So if you are a beginner and you're trying with all your might to get into the industry or you're stuck on something, everyone kind of takes you under their wing and really just looks after you and says, look, have you seen this resource, or have you seen this website, or have you got this book? But then it's also a weird balance of learning when to leave as well. Otherwise you end up that creepy guy who's stood next to everyone not knowing what to do.
Right.
But conferences are a wonderful place to network.
And I think everybody wants to talk.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that nobody thinks about is, you know, everybody wants to talk. So like I find it really easy to go up to people. I didn't used to, but yeah, if you just go up and talk to people, everybody's so nice.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, definitely.
Like nobody's gonna bite your head off.
No.
All right. So Steve asks, what sizes or breakpoints do you design for when starting a new mobile design?
Okay, so that's responsive design rather than actual fixed native stuff.
Yes.
In terms of breakpoints, I don't really believe they exist sometimes. So they do, the standard ones exist,
sure.
But then anything outside of that, I think a breakpoint is exactly what it says it is. A breakpoint should be when the design breaks and not at a set size. So as long as you've designed in percentages and you can kind of do that thing that we all do of pulling in the browser window in and out, your content will reformat to a certain point. if you've done that properly. It then becomes an issue of whether you're going to take something full screen, whether you're going to remove it, whether you're going to break that into parts that are smaller, or that becomes the issue.
Right.
And normally that will happen at a breakpoint that's outside the normal ones, which are like the iPhone, iPad, other tablets, etc., etc. So my breakpoints are always a bit strange because they're just where the design breaks and not actually at a particular set size.
Gosh, that's a really great way to think of it. I don't think I've ever heard that before. Maybe I have, but just thinking of it in terms of, yeah, where the design breaks.
Yeah. To me, it was just one of those things. I found responsive design quite a hard learning curve, again, because it was quite mathematical.
Yeah.
So, and I'd been doing iOS design for the entire time that everyone was going responsive design. I was kind of that charlatan sitting in my office going, please no one ask me about it because I haven't even read the book or anything right now.
Right.
And then when I did dig into it, it just made sense that breakpoints shouldn't be device points. Otherwise, you're just designing for design specific breakpoints and you're defeating the purpose of it. So then it just becomes, well, breakpoints should be where the design breaks.
Very cool. So Romaine asks, do you have any advice for freelancers?
Get out of bed, take your pajamas off, have a good shower. No, I'm being serious. That's the one thing I think.
I know you're being serious. That's why I'm laughing.
As freelancers, I think you get so comfortable with this whole notion of I can just work at home in my pajamas. I don't have to have a shower until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But I think that mindset is really dangerous to get into. So actually just getting up and having a normal routine, like a normal working person, or come out. I sometimes, if I'm feeling really like, oh, it's Monday morning, or I just take a walk round the block and come back into my house again and feel like, oh, I've taken my walk to work and now I'm at work.
Right.
I think it's more of a mindset thing. If you're the sort of person who's going to get distracted by the latest Grand Theft Auto sitting in the corner and wanting to play with that, then you just have to change the way that you have a mindset about work. You just have to be aware that you're the sort of person who will naturally want to gravitate off work and try and bring it back every so often. But it's a hard one. Freelancing is tough. It's really tough.
I found that having a separate physical space helps me work at home. You know, if you can do that, like that's really one of the greatest things you can do for yourself. Is just having a separate room. You go in there, you work, and when you come out, work's over.
Yeah.
You know,
Also, I think with working from home, you have to be more aware of when you just do that thing where you're sat in front of your computer and actually you're not working anymore. You've gravitated towards Twitter or Facebook, and you think that because you're sat at your desk, you're working. And that took me a while to understand when I was actually just what I thought was like even passively working. It's not
you're just doing social media marketing.
You find yourself sat there and you're like, actually, I'm not working at all. I should have a break and then come back. It's understanding those kind of nuances of design, of working from home, I think.
Absolutely. So Andy asks, what was your thought process behind the footer navigation on the You Know Who website? Was it purely for aesthetics?
No, I'll honestly answer, I quite liked it because it was different. I wanted to think more mobile first concept, and so it was a navigation that changes and reformats for iPhone beautifully and any other phone or tablet. So it was me actually trying to experiment with the whole notion of mobile first and then coming up to desktop and wondering whether people would see or understand that the navigation was flipped. It's just one of those things. It was just trying to be different.
It seems to work. I mean, I looked at it and I think it looks pretty nice.
Oh, thank you. That's all changing anyway, so it's irrelevant. But thank you. Yeah, no, it was just me trying to be different.
So I think we only have a couple more questions here. Ollie asks, you've had success outside the web with Blush Bar. Is there anything within the industry you want to challenge as a personal project? I guess you should probably explain what Blush Bar is.
Okay, so Blush Bar is my personal project. It's actually a blow dry bar, which seems so random, but I have my reasons behind it. Repeat the last section of the question, sorry. So what?
Ollie says, is there anything within the industry you want to challenge as a personal project?
Oh, I guess on a broader level, I really want to crack Ruby on Rails. Just because I really like the idea of of being able to fully design out and develop anything. And I would really like to do the same with Objective-C and Cocoa, to be honest.
Treehouse is a wonderful place to learn all of those things.
It's true. It's true. I've been working my way through, actually, on the Ruby course. Yeah, in terms of sort of bigger industry stuff, I don't know. I have something in the pipeline at the moment, but I'm keeping stum on it at the moment. But yeah, there's always, that's the great thing about our industry though, right? There's always a problem that anyone can solve, not just anyone who's like seen as head of their game in whatever they do. The problems that are in our industry are there for anyone to solve, whether you're a freelancer, whether you're just starting out. There's ways of collaborating with people that you meet at conferences who do have the skills. That's what I like about our industry, is newbies can solve something that people who've been in the industry for years have been struggling because they've got a fresh approach on it. So I think anything's up for the grabs.
Very true. Okay, 2 more questions here. Going back to freelancing, is it honestly possible for most freelancers to survive? So many jobs don't end up paying a living wage. That's interesting.
So this one is a really hard one. I think actually last week when I was at Patterns, we were talking about this. We were saying that it's a really hard thing for everyone who's been in the industry a while to then think back to how it was when you didn't have any money. Every person who is now seen as being someone who's good at what they do has done that and has done those struggles. But it's very hard when you hear that whole follow your dream, everything will turn out okay. It's hard to then think back to, no, you have to put in a lot of hard work. And I think maybe the only way for some people to start off on the freelancing path is to start in a company first, where you feel that you have that cushion of the wage coming in, and then do freelancing on the side if you can. We were also talking about how wages, and if you are in a company where you've been there a while and they can't raise your salary because of the economic climate we're in, try and barter to get days at home that you can work. Therefore, you can work on side projects and you can work on building up freelance portfolios and things. I think it's really hard for people to just go, now I'm going to be a freelancer nowadays, because there's a lot of people who want to do it as well. So I think it's a really hard thing at the moment, and it's a hard thing to survive amongst everyone and be seen and heard amongst everyone as well. But I think there is enough work to go around. So it's just putting yourself out there, marketing yourself, learning a bit about personal branding and how you're seen by other people is really important. Absolutely.
So last question here is, what is the best or your favorite project that you've designed?
Oh, interesting. I'm going to go with 2 because they're very different. One, I was working on an internal app for News International, which was really interesting. I can't show any screenshots of it because it was an internal app, but it was really interesting because it had to solve many problems about content and show who was maybe the best journalist for that week, who was really engaging on Twitter. It pulled in lots of different social feeds. So it meant designing tons of dashboards, which I've always wanted to design. I think anyone who's a designer has always wanted to just get hold of a dashboard. And it meant designing about 18 different dashboards that all had to have a similar look and feel, but did very, very different things. So that was like a dream project for me that I worked on for a year. I was really, really lucky to do that. Second one would probably be my side project back at home, because the blow dry bar, which is really random, but what it meant I could do was actually take everything that I'd learnt over the 10 years of being in the industry and go back to, if I didn't have any clients at all telling me what to do, how would I design something like this? So it took me back to doing print work, branding work, websites, really basic website stuff, but all without that kind of oppressive client coming down on your shoulders saying, no, can we move that 10 pixels to the left, So that was great because it gave me complete creative freedom to go back and go, oh, I wonder if I could still do print work, or I wonder if I could still brand something. So that was my other favourite this year.
Well, very cool stuff. Well, that's all the time we have for today. You are who on Twitter?
Yeah, Sazzy, S-A-Z-Z-Y on Twitter.
So if we didn't get to your question, go ahead and tweet to Sarah. I'm sure she'd be happy to answer. You're you're here at Treehouse because you're actually shooting a course. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I just got finished shooting in here today. So I'm shooting a course for iOS design, so it's mobile app design. It's a whole course about, we're actually designing a diary app. So it takes you right from the start of planning and doing your wireframes and writing certain documentation that will help with developers, right through to designing and exporting your artwork. So it's like a full course on mobile app design.
Very cool stuff. Well, I'm sure we'll release that as soon as we possibly can. It'll be coming very soon. If you'd like to learn more about us and learn web design, web development, mobile business, and so much more, you can check us out at teamtreehouse.com. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you real soon.